Thank you all for being here today. I'm so excited to spend this time with you. As generally, I will be giving you some reminders. A lot of what we'll talk about today, you probably already know and you might already be doing. It's just a chance to elevate it and perhaps emphasize and validate your work. So let's start, as we often do, with an arrival practice. So to start, what I invite you to do, and this is simply an invitation, is if you'd like to just put down your technology for now, untether from that phone, from that computer, whatever it is, and allow your feet to get firmly planted on the floor. You can rest into your chair, or if you're standing, just rest on the earth. Really feel your feet underneath you. Feel them resting. And the invitation is for you to close your eyes. Not an obligation, but you are invited to close your eyes if that feels safe and good. And just meeting yourself. Maybe again today, or maybe for the first time today. You've done a lot to get here, physically, mentally, spiritually. You're here. And so just really allowing yourself to drop in, to settle. And notice. Notice if you can feel your heart beating. Can you feel your breath breathing? And for this few moments, just really understanding that you are enough. There's no need to strive to get anywhere, physically or metaphorically. No need to brace. No need to hearken back. Simply arriving here and knowing that you are enough, so much more than enough, just as you are. And now perhaps generating in that feeling of enoughness and safety and connection with self, generating an appreciation for your sources of strength. Perhaps that's your heritage, your family, your ancestors, your offspring, people around you. Perhaps it's nature, your faith in a higher power. So many sources of strength. What is yours, or what are yours? And really tapping into that sense of connection and gratitude for that strength that powers you, has powered you for your entire life. And next, turning that gratitude back toward yourself, doing a U-turn toward yourself, holding the mirror up and seeing you as only you can see you, and appreciating yourself. Not in a puffed up or prideful way, but just really in an authentic way of seeing who and how you are right now, with gratitude. And then the last step as we wind out this practice is to think about ways that we might take all the good that has been generated in this room with each other outside these walls, outside this city, outside this state, outside this country, and really radiating that goodness in amazing and miraculous ways. So now you're invited to reopen your eyes if you've been having them closed, and look around and really sense what gratitude and peace and calm does. Any thoughts, any reaction to that? How are you? Great. Grateful. You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So today I'm going to be coming from this vantage point of basically what I've been up to since we saw each other last. So it has really come home to me with a sense of urgency that leadership development is so important. It is just so important. And I don't think that we've moved the needle that much. And which is sad for me to say because I've been at it for a while, and yet there's so much potential. You know, when we think about resources that are constrained, we can think about time or money, but when we think about love and compassion and imagination, they are unconstrained resources. And we can use them in our leadership development processes and plans and strategies. And so what I'll be doing in this time together is just giving you a high-level overview of some of the leadership things that I'm involved with, but it's not about me and my work. It's about how you might take this and amplify things that you're doing or connect things that you're doing or maybe reframe or reimagine things that you're doing. So to cultivate this material, I'm drawing from a lot. I'm drawing from our Center on Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience that we built at ASU, and many of you were part of that. Raise your hands if you were a part of that in any way. Thank you so much for your work and your dedication. I'm drawing it from years of experience as a nurse and an educator, a clinician and an educator, with many, many, many colleagues from across different disciplines. And so really looking at how do we take the evidence, and Mickey, thank you so much for the walk through the data that's emerging and just so very important. How do we take that and really translate it into practice, clinical practice, educational practice, leadership development practice in real and meaningful ways? So I'm going to give you snippets from 3 areas of my life. One is leadership development in big healthcare organizations. The other is the work that I'm doing with at University of Wisconsin-Madison with nursing students, so the graduate and undergraduate levels, and the really exciting work at the Center for Healthy Minds about a course called The Art and Science of Human Flourishing that is for freshmen. So I'm going to take little bits from each of those, wind them together, I hope, in a cohesive story that you can take into your own leadership practice. So these are the different buckets. And so the first is leadership from the inside out. And this is a program that has been implemented. We published it last year in Nursing Management in March, April of 2025. And it's a program that is a curriculum that I co-created in partnership with an EAP industry partner and different hospitals, most of them on the East Coast and in the Southeast. And the idea here is that we work with the chief nurse executive and his or her executive team to come up with a very tailored approach for leadership development. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then, again, reflective practices that are coupled with leadership training for nursing students and across the interprofessional realm. Exciting news on that front. And then we'll talk for a little tiny bit about an app called the Healthy Minds program. And if you have an iPhone and you want to look at it, it's a free app. It's called Healthy Minds. You can download that. It's from the Center for Healthy Minds at UW-Madison. I'm not here to promote it. I'm just here to talk about the way that we adapted it for healthcare providers. And then finally, we'll talk about just a huge source of joy for me, which is the Art and Science of Human Flourishing course. So these are the curricular elements that were co-created with, again, C-suite nurses from very different hospitals. And all of this work was done 2021, 2022 is when we started. So I don't use the word post-pandemic because I don't know that that's an accurate characterization of where we are. But that's kind of where it started. And as was noted earlier, really the suffering that was going on then transcended every layer of the organization. So these are some of the learning objectives that I offered to the nurse leadership teams, and then we would tailor them according to their organizational priorities and what was going on for them. So, for instance, in New York City, I won't name the exact hospitals, but we worked together to meet with the leadership team, go over these objectives, and then really hone them down to be meaningful for that particular site. And what we learned in the process was it was also really important for me. I facilitated the workshops. It was really important for me to be in touch with that chief nurse in the time like 10 days prior to the workshop, because things change so fast. And the issues that would come up that I would need to be sensitized to were incredibly diverse and important. For instance, in one of the hospitals, on the day that we were set to start the workshop, the chief nurse had been fired. And she was part of the workshop. And I asked, do you want to continue? And she said, absolutely yes. I want to be there. And this is my team. And this is part of how we're going to get through this, which I found very admirable, to say the least. So some of these were done in person. Some of them were done virtually. And the data were pretty clear that it was a very effective workshop. We compared in person to virtual trainings. And what do you think? What do you think? Right, in person was very much, I shouldn't say very much, not statistically significantly different, but better. The in-personness of delivering a workshop is very much better than on Zoom. I don't have to tell you that. So looking at the different areas that they really wanted to talk about, I always come back to this idea, and I know you've probably all talked about this too, but it always, I think, is worth saying that any intervention at the individual level or the team level cannot be taken in isolation. Right? We also have to be working at the systems level, at the policy level, at the highest level of leadership and impact. So this is not an either-or endeavor, and I don't want to leave you with the idea that it ever is. A lot of the interventions that I do are at the individual and team level, but that doesn't mean that that's where we stop. Right? We can't impact system change if we're not well and healthy within ourselves, right? Organizations are organisms, and they're made up of cells, and we are the cells. So these are some very pragmatic steps. These are from the literature, and these are also from anecdotal delivering the workshop and hearing what participants had to say. And then also we do some work with the American Organization of Nurse Leaders in conjunction with their meeting every year, doing basically listening sessions with executive nurse leaders about what is up and coming and what do they find successful strategies. So the one that we've heard over and over even today is lead by example. And I will say that when I talk about this, I want to be clear that this doesn't mean that you have to be the better way to think about it is be a real model, not a role model, right? And you might have heard that before. Be a real person, an authentic person. It doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. In fact, none of us are, and holding up perfection as that image to be emulated, it backfires in so many ways. So things like beginning each meeting, each huddle, each time you're together with a centering practice like what we just did. It doesn't even have to be that long. Sometimes even a one-word check-in, how are you doing? Just everybody goes around and says one word of how they're feeling, can be really interesting because what generally happens is that there's a wide variety of how people are feeling. And so you get the idea that when you see your colleague with a big smile on their face, they might be at a 3 on that 10-point scale. You don't know until you ask. So also recommending to everyone here, that if you can begin your morning by giving yourself a little bit of that self-value, that self-love, in whatever way works for you, if that's music, if it's dancing in the kitchen as you wait for the coffee to be done, if it's kissing your beloved, whatever it is, take the time to start your day out right. Encouraging frequent breaks. Now, I know for many busy executives, every 2-hour break is just not feasible. However, a 2-hour break from what you were just thinking about or doing is. You can change your focus. You can get up if you've been seated. You can change that you've been doing, and sometimes that's enough to be a break. Although other breaks are good too. Getting up, stretching, using the bathroom, feeding yourself. You'll see here, really at the basic level of eating and drinking during the day so that our energy level is sustained and our cognitive abilities are sustained. I can't emphasize enough that ending the workday with a cultivation of a positive, think what went well today? There might be lots of things that went wrong, but what did go right today? There's bound to be more the more we think about it, right? And so often, how do we enter our home space after a long day at work? We enter generally by telling what kind of story? You wouldn't believe what just happened to me. You would not believe the day I just had. And what kind of tone does that set? Right? And so just even noticing if you can get into the routine of ending the day on a positive note and then bringing that with you home to start the day with, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. It just changes the channel completely. And then lastly, really promoting and normalizing any mental health services that you have the availability to offer within your organization and outside your organization. So, Tony, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And the more that we can talk and share and listen together and normalize that mental health is health and that we all can support each other in that endeavor. So just a few more things, really cultivating this idea that peers can support peers. And, a lot of this is drawn actually from military training in boot camp. They have battle buddies, and it's kind of a statement when I'm here talking to you as a healthcare audience that I'm drawing from boot camp examples, but don't we relate to that? Right? And especially as we're thinking about onboarding new people and new leaders in particular, so many leaders are transitioning out of the workforce and will for the next 5 to 10 years, that many are coming in with less clinical experience than we've seen in previous generations. So that's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing to be sensitized to. And pairing people up with somebody in the same position where they can, well, it doesn't have to be the same job title, but new people together as they onboard, especially with leadership roles. How many of you were well prepared for your highest leadership role? 0. I see 0 hands. And isn't that true? Most of us learn leadership by doing it and by really dear mentors that tell us the helpful truths and the hard truths. And certainly I've had my share of that. But generally, the first leadership program I went to, I entered it as an executive leader. And by then, a lot of my behaviors had already started. And so thinking earlier about how can we get to people earlier to make those interventions work. And so these are just some very behavioral approaches, and none of them are costly, and all of them I think are pretty pragmatic. And again, are you doing some of these things? I hope that you are. The last one on the list also pertains, of course, to relationships outside of work, is ask how you're doing, not just what you're doing. And my grandkids reteach me this a lot because, I ask, how was your day at school? They'll tell me a little bit, but if I ask, how are you doing, they're much more likely to tell me the real the real deal. So many of us are yearning for connection. And, Vivek Murthy's work on loneliness epidemic really highlighted this. The first statement here is a gross oversimplification, but sometimes it helps me to think about stress being the difference between what I expect and what reality is. That's where I get disturbed, irritated, aggravated. How about you? Does that make sense? And so over time, that can lead to burnout, especially if we're thinking about the stress being the lack of resource or time or ability to do the best that we can do. Because most of us in healthcare want to do the best that we can do every day. And so our natural response to that is to be self-protective, to come up with strategies to soothe ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes in if we take those self-soothing behaviors to an extreme, right? And I'm thinking of things like eating, alcohol, TV binging, shopping, gambling, all of the things. So just thinking about how when we engage in those mind-numbing behaviors, it really numbs us also from joy and the ability to experience happiness and meaning. And in the brain, what happens? I'm surrounded now at the Center for Healthy Minds with all these neuroscientists, and I feel like I'm doing a postdoc, and it's amazing. So one of the things I've learned about meditation and other forms of contemplative practice is the default mode network is healthy in all of us, right? And so that's sort of for autopilot. And for people in general, we have that negativity bias. But in healthcare workers, we really have a negativity bias because it served us. It helps us diagnose. It helps us problem solve. It helps us do all the things. And it can get overdeveloped. And so with that negativity bias rooted in the default mode network, which is actually a part of our brain, we can also turn that inward and start to really only see the distressing things about ourselves. So the way that meditation and contemplative practices work and other things that really refocus the attention is it interrupts that default mode network and actually rewires the brain structurally and functionally to be more at a steady state of being able to problem solve and to come up with not only good solutions, but to enjoy life. And so interrupting that negative spiral that can take us downward and be more apt to be in the state of gratitude and awe and compassion. So now transitioning, all of those things were sort of learned from or delivered to nurse executives and their teams. Now I'm transitioning into thinking about the teaching environment, the higher ed environment, which is also undergoing turbulent times right now. Right? And so, and in health professions education, we've got the double. We've got the double higher ed plus healthcare. So interesting times these days. These are journaling questions that I often use with undergraduate and graduate nursing students, and I thought that we could take some time and do some of them today. So I'm going to read the practices, and then if you have a pen, paper, or device, I'm going to ask you to each just choose one, and we'll spend some time writing. So I'm going to read them, and you can just choose one. So the first is free write for 5 minutes, and we might do a little less than 5, but free write about things in your life that you're grateful for. And Mickey mentioned the gratitude journal too and the power of it. And what I mean by free write is, don't let your pen leave the paper. Just write, and no editing, no penmanship, demerits for penmanship, nothing, just free write. The next is reflect and write about what you have accomplished in the last year. This is a great time to do it because our seasons are changing and we have a quarter of a year left until Happy New Year. And so think about what have you accomplished, but not your to-do list, right? Think also broader than that. What aspects of yourself have you seen emerge in the last year? What have you accomplished personally? How do you think self-care and leadership are linked? What drew you into, I'll just say, healthcare? What is it that drew you into healthcare? Write about it. Write about how caring for yourself has ripple effects for other people. How are you living with your purpose in mind? And give specific examples. And then last, and usually I save this till near the end of the semester, is to have them reflect on reflection, because they've been reflecting all semester. What has the practice of self-reflection taught you? All right, so I'm going to turn off my microphone and turn on my timer for about 3 minutes. I want you to choose one of these and write about it. You won't be sharing, so this is just for you. Okay, about 30 seconds left. And I would ask you to date this. So the date is October 3rd, 2025. So that maybe you can come back and reflect on what you wrote. So writing is a great way to access what's going on inside, right? And it's also a great way to mark our growth. And so in classrooms, I find it's very interesting and calming if you have an issue that is, that students are anxious about, or questioning. Taking a writing break is a really good way to kind of clarify what's going on before moving ahead. So I offer that to you. Use it freely. So next I'm going to tell you just very briefly about this app, the Healthy Minds app, and this adaptation that was devised by Sydney Tan, who is a neurosurgical resident at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I just found out that Dr. Cynthia Stonington's nephew is also in that program, so I hope to be able to connect those two. So her idea was to, and this is a really, talk about a brave space. She's in the surgical suite noticing that, of course, neurosurgeons need to pay attention. I mean, that's a statement of the obvious, right? They need to be able to focus, and yet it is also a very high stakes, high tension, and sometimes, dare I say it, harassing environment. it can be hard. And people aren't always nice to each other. That doesn't just go on in the OR suite. I don't know, am I breaking a surprise to you? No, we can be really cruel to each other, unfortunately. That's something we also have not moved the needle on, but I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful that we can do that. So this app is just a general meditation app. And if you download it, you'll see that it's very doable. It's like in 2-minute increments. You can do active meditation, sitting meditation, and there's little like podcasts that come along with it. And it's the brainchild. Dr. Richie Davidson is the head of the Center for Healthy Minds. So it's very much part of our research there too, looking at the outcomes of this app for different populations. So her idea was to tailor it to healthcare providers. And so we did some different recordings that really made it relevant for the lived experience of what is it like to be a nurse, a physician, a pharmacist, a counselor. And they're recorded in the voices of people doing the work. And then testing to see if that makes a difference in the uptake of the app or any of the well-being outcomes. So next is probably the favorite part of my life right now, which is teaching this course, The Art and Science of Human Flourishing, which was developed by 3 universities, Penn State, University of Virginia, and UW-Madison. And the idea was, given the mental health crisis in college students and adolescents, what kind of skills and academic learning can we give them to address this from a young age? And from my vantage point as a leadership developer, freshmen are stem cells. They're undifferentiated stem cells, and we can get in there and help program them in a way that really, and I don't mean that in a Orwellian way. I just mean in a way that is good for their flourishing. And by extension, when they are leaders, and many of them have already been in leadership positions in high school, they can lead with that kind of compassion and flourishing background that is informed by science and by practice, right? So this is the framework that we use, and this is, if any of you have ever used Canvas, that's our learning platform that we use. And so every week they go through the foundations is just level setting, getting them up to speed on the terminology and sort of the foundations of well-being. And then awareness, connection, insight, and integration are really the 4 main pillars that we talk about. And so each of the words in black on the bottom, those are weeks in a semester. So this week we talked about attention. So Richie Davidson came in and talked about the neuroscience of attention and focusing. And every week they have a discussion section. I get to lead the honors section, which is just amazing. Talk about imposter syndrome and just anxiety about academic performance. They are so hard on themselves. So very hard on themselves. And so we spent a whole hour one week talking about imposter syndrome and pointing them to the NIH resources on imposter syndrome because it is such an issue. And there's good scientific evidence behind how to address it. And by the way, mindfulness is one of those ways, because becoming aware of what's going on allows us to address it. So this is them. This is them the first day of class. And every Monday, they come in and they have connection. And so they are asked to get with somebody around them and just fill each other in on how your weekend was. So this is the first time. And I'll tell you the decibel level, it's incredible. And then every week it gets louder and louder, which I completely encourage it. So on Monday we do that, and then we do a reflective practice, and then we head into the lecture. And then also on Wednesday, every time they come in for lecture, Monday and Wednesday, we do a reflective practice before we head into lecture. They also write every week a reflection journal to a prompt that is graded graded. It's, pass, fail, but it's graded and they get feedback on it. And then they have a quiz that's over the academic part of it. And it's rigorous. I mean, they have readings and they have other things that they learn. But also, they're learning how to meditate, and they're learning how mindfulness and flourishing in the individual is not sufficient. That we also need to think about our interconnection with each other in our families, our societies, our neighborhoods, the planet. And so they're really coming to the narrative arc of the course as we start at the individual level and then end up really talking about more global connectivity. So after a couple years of teaching this course, so it's been in play for, I think, 5 years now. I've helped teach it for 3. This is my 3rd. Students got together and self-organized this organization, Healthy Minds on Campus. And their charter is that they discuss what they've learned and learn more evidence-based practices and habits that support their well-being. And looking at individual and group supports for well-being. They learn how to lead mindfulness practices and other flourishing interventions, and then they go out and teach it to other students and other groups on campus. And their goal is continue to grow as students and healthy-minded people. So isn't that just the most optimistic thing? To think about these 17, 18-year-olds that have taken it on themselves, and they are going to change this world. So now I would like you to tune in again. So that's sort of a global view. And so now I'd like you again to come into that posture of centeredness. If you've been sitting way too long, you can stand up and then sit down, because it feels like you have been sitting for a while. So yeah, stand up. Yes. And you can even stay standing if that's a better way for you to do this. All for it. So I invite you, stand, sit, dance, whatever. Yeah, there we go. She's busting a move back there. So again, just checking in with your body, checking in with your mind. And if you'd allow me to just plant these seeds as a way to summarize what I hope that you've learned from the talk, is that leadership development is not a one-size-fits-all. It has to be customized to the organization and to the leader and to the team. That it also can be done at so many different levels, and it must be done at different, and I'm using levels in terms of developmental levels. We can start really early and watch the flourishing behaviors and leadership grow as the time goes by. And then lastly, that you are part of this endeavor. This is not separate from you. This is within you. And you have those capacities that are completely unlimited of love, compassion, and imagination, and that your part in the family of things, as Mary Oliver says, is really important. And so minding your own flourishing is not selfish. It is really the first thing that we can do to be present with our patients, with our colleagues, and with each other. So really tending to that flame is very important. And I thank you for taking today to really hone in on that and nurture yourselves and each other. So to end the practice, once again, we'll just say that may any good that has come from this time together could be generated far outside this room and far outside the walls of time as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for your kind attention.